okay, well, the board probably fell better than it did in our simulations in the week leading up to it, which is always nice. But we were really excited about the two players that we got, and we're really excited that we were able to pick up the extra draft resources while coveted at 9.
Andrew, how many did you get? A lot of calls for 6, and Casey was the best one, or how'd that kind of go when you were on the clock?
We did get several calls for 6. We thought through. I should say this: we got several calls for 6 and 9, the combination of 6 and 9. At 6, Kansas City made the most sense because it was a big enough move where we could pick up resources, but also small enough with what had happened on the board that we could get one of our short list of targets, of which Spencer was at the top. And then at 9, we did get a little bit of action there as well, but nothing that necessarily compelled us to move off of the pick.
I know you kind of believe the tackle is tackle, but in Spencer's case, does it help that you've seen him play on the left side?
Yeah, it certainly helps, but really you're looking more for traits in that regard, Dan, just because if you think about it, left side to the right side all the time, and it never gets talked about. And that distinction, it's just, you need 2 of them to pass protect. And one, you maybe help a little, the other, you help a little bit more. But Spencer, he's super athletic. He's played on both sides. He's really smart. We're excited to have him.
Hey, Andrew, Casey had some drops. Are you concerned about that?
Yeah, every receiver besides maybe Larry Fitzgerald has a couple drops. And, Casey, he's been a dynamic producer at NC State, Texas A&M. He's electric with the ball in his hands, and we're looking forward to having him.
Andrew, this offseason, Spencer, the versatility that he has, was that really intentional for you this offseason with maybe what has happened with the offensive line the last couple of years? It just feels like versatility was like a top of your wish list for every player that you brought in that position with this offseason.
I'd say if you're on the O-line, you typically need to be able to play 2 spots. I'd say probably more so than versatility, it was resiliency within the O-line in terms of how you build that position group. Versatility is one way to do it. Strength in numbers is another way to do it. I think we'll be in a position where we have both. With Spencer in particular, look, we're looking to park him at left tackle and let him play. So while it's nice that he's played several spots, that's not our vision for him.
Do you see, I know he played inside and out at A&M. Do you envision him being able to play both roles for you?
Yeah, we do.
I read the letter that he wrote. Just how impressive it is that he's been able to get where he has, given all he's grown up with, including the stuff.
Yeah, that's one thing that we talked about. I told him, when he was on his 30 visit, I think it's incredible what he's overcome and gone through in his life. When we got the his agent sent the letter, I'm sure to every GM, but when I called him after the letter, I was like, hey, look, I thought that was really awesome, and that was separate from obviously liking him as a prospect, but I'll share one story. When Casey visited, I was like, hey, I hope you're a Brown, but if you're not, I sure hope you're in the NFC because I don't want to face you. And then I told his agent afterwards, I was like, hey, everything that kid's about, everything that he's overcome, if he's not here, he just needs to know he's got a fan. I really love the person, and he's obviously a dynamic football player.
Was his punt return ability just a bonus, or did it put him over the top among other receivers left?
I'd say it was a bonus, more than anything, Tony, because it's certainly great if you can get the ball in playmakers' hand in a variety of ways. It allows you to be more explosive as a team, allows you to score more points, but also being realistic that, if you look at former, let's say, high-pick receivers, whether it's Deshaun Jackson back in the day, Dez Bryant early in his career, usually at some point they probably play their way off of that. So it's not necessarily bankable for their entire career. But with Casey, it certainly was an added bonus.
Andrew, obviously you had Spencer Bannon number 1 amongst your targets. But did you give much thought to Jordan Tyson, and was it a little difficult at that moment to trade away from him at all, or did you know that you were targeting Spencer?
We liked a number of those guys up there, including Jordan. But Spencer was our really our top. Excuse me, Spencer was our top target at that point.
A lot was made about Spencer's arm length. I was curious when you watched the film, how much of that was like a talking point, and maybe what are the traits that you think will allow that to not be an issue in the NFL?
Yeah, I know it gets talked about a lot, and I remember the legendary O-line coach Dante Scarnecchia with New England used to say it's way overrated. I think most times tackles get beat for a lack of feet or athleticism or anchor or awareness, as opposed to length. The biggest thing is like, hey, how can the guys, shorten the corner? And with elite athletes like Spencer, they do it with their movement skills. Maybe if you have a guy that just is not as quick or not as agile, then length is a little bit more important. But the difference in his success isn't going to be, this in terms of arm length. He has a number of incredible both physical and mental characteristics that we think will lead to a successful transition.
How do you measure when you have like a dynamic athlete like KC, but guys drop balls? How do you kind of measure that?
Yeah, it's really relative to the population. Like I know that gets talked about, but he has natural dexterity. It's nothing extreme or nothing out of. I guess it's not an outlier, relative to other receivers in the draft class. I know that's been the primary talking point, but we're comfortable with Casey's hands.
He drove to Cleveland from Indy. Was he, in fact, your first 30 visit?
Great question, Tony. I don't know if he was our first. He was among our first. But we had a couple of guys in right after the combine. He was one of them. I don't think he was the very first, but he was among our first. Yes.
Did you?
Let me go Mary Kay, and then I'll go Zach.
Do you envision using all of the remaining draft picks that you have now that you picked up the extras yet?
Look, I would hope to draft in volume this year, but it really just depends on how the board falls. So I'm also like, depending on how good of a review you guys write us, I'm going to use that 7th rounder if you guys write something today. Okay.
Did Todd and you to an extent see some Zay Flowers and how Todd used him in Casey?
I do think there are some similarities in terms of like the movement skills, the twitch. Honestly, some of the questions regarding the hands coming out, Terry. I think the one thing that maybe gets a little bit lost is like KC is a much bigger player than Zay, but I think there is some overlap in the characteristics. I think, look, if we get a player who's comparable to Zay Flowers, when we're sitting here from 3 years, we'll be elated.
To go back to Spencer, I mean, early on, I guess how early on in this process have you guys really zeroed in on him as the top tackle in a pretty deep class?
We used the whole process, Ashley. We did feel like Spencer was, unique in terms of, everything that comprised his on-field performance, his physical skills, and his makeup. But we do like to use the whole shot clock.
In terms of the trade with KC, was it an option to get a 2027 pick?
No.
You wanted an extra 3rd-round pick?
There was no option or discussion of future picks.
I know one of only being 2 picks that you didn't know. But what's that nervous level like? Saying, okay, you want Spencer, but there's a chance. I mean, were you worried at all that 7 and 8 could take him?
That's part of the risk, Scott. When we were on the clock at 6, what I told the room is, hey, there are really kind of 3 guys left that, we'd be elated with, if we had to sit and pick. Moving back 3 spots and having an idea of where Kansas City was going, we knew we were going to get one of those 3 guys. We also felt the teams behind us, Washington, they extended Tunsil. They drafted Josh Connerly in the 1st round last year. New Orleans, they drafted Kelvin Banks, at 9 last year, and then Fuaga the year before that. So we felt pretty comfortable that a tackle wasn't going to go unless a team traded into it. But if one did, we felt good with the group of players that were in front of us.
Are you able to contain his excitement upstairs, or are you now his new best friend with getting him.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear who you mentioned.
Todd's reaction upstairs, the first round. Was he able to contain his excitement?
He was pretty pumped up. So we all were. Because look, you don't always have the board fall away that you predict. And look, the idea is like, these guys, they haven't hit the grass. They still have to perform at our level, but it's a start that we are excited about because of the players and the people.
Spencer mentioned Joe Thomas and just how much he looks up to him and everything. How much are you guys going to try to? Do you try to facilitate getting those two together? I know Joe's got his own schedule and everything, but how much do you try to get those two together?
Yeah, Joe's obviously one of our distinguished alumnus, and he's always involved in our O linemen. Also, there's a connection with Joe and Spencer's representation. But we love. I think you all know we love having Joe around here and everything like that. I'm sure he will have words of wisdom for Spencer, and that's definitely a connection we will look to make. Let me go here first, Jeff, and then I'll come back to you.
You obviously talk so much leading up to the draft just about not being, crippled by needs versus best player available, sort of that strategy. When push came to shove, especially when you were on the clock at 6, like what were those conversations like in sort of deciding what was there and what your needs were? Because as it turned out, you obviously did end up addressing some of your bigger needs tonight.
There really wasn't a ton of conversation. All those conversations happened beforehand. Like at this point, it's like I would almost make it the quote of like calling plays. You talk through all those different scenarios ahead of time. And this one was straightforward because, we viewed Spencer as one of the top prospects in the draft. So it made it pretty easy. There was, we didn't really feel like there was any type of trade-off in that regard. Go ahead, Jeff.
Can you just reflect, Andrew, on how you've rebuilt the offensive line here in these last 2 months?
Yeah, I think we are very excited about the players that we've brought in, as well as the development that's occurring with existing players. Obviously the vets that we acquired, whether it's via trade or free agency or with the cap cut, we felt like we've brought quality production, as well as experience to that group. And then obviously with night one adding Spencer, we think that's a big, foundational piece to that position group. We'll see where we go from here. Look, we still have 9 more picks. We may not be done, with the O-line at that point. And like I said, we're excited about some of our younger guys that are going to get greater opportunities, but it's a good start.
You talked about the traits with Spencer, but I know to be a great O-line, there's some personality aspects, right? Some nasty that the guy has to have. Can you sort of speak to that side of Spencer and what you guys learned about him?
Yeah, I think one of the cool things about Spencer is you look at how scheme transcendent he's been, because what they did in 24 versus 25 was a lot different in terms of how they structured the run game, how they did pass pro, and you can see him move, you can see him maul. I think he's very gifted and very versatile in that regard, and don't be fooled by his kindness when you meet him. Have you guys Zoom with him already? Yeah, don't be fooled by his kindness. He's nasty on the field. So, good. All right.
Hockey playoff.
You know what? I watched the